Hey everybody, David Voxmullen with Push the Button here. I wanted to just give you a quick mention before we start this very serious topic of state-assisted suicide. There was some audio problems that we had because we had 4 people on, and obviously when you're recording you don't realize it's happening. I did what I could to try to salvage most of the sound. If there is some of it that's still not quite audible, I do apologize, and it will be resolved very shortly. Otherwise, enjoy the show.
You're listening to the DVM Podcast Empire.
Now with over 1 million downloads.
1 million downloads. Find us online at DVMPE.com.
100% free.
1,000,000% fan.
And now,
Push the button.
Is it possible that we have permitted ideology, political and economic philosophies, and governmental policies to keep us from considering the very real, everyday problems of our people?
So what if my feelings are hurt? Does that give me the right to prevent others from expressing their opinions?
Wait a second, Doc! Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear?
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Mr. Anderson.
Don't push it.
Hey everybody, welcome back once again to Push the Button Podcast, your number one podcast for all things worldly and otherwise. We are your podcast for things that get you hot, even though we tell you not to. I am your host, David Voxmullen, the man of many talents.
And I am your other host, Mr. Anderson, a man of a few talents.
A man of few words. Not really.
Few talents, few words.
A man of few talents, but many words. There you go. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm very good at self-promotion, putting myself in.
Yeah, you are. You're very good. You're very good. You're a very good. You're a good guy.
You're a good guy to know.
And with us together again, it's like the gang's all here from our very first episode. Returning guest, Father Nels. Thanks so much for coming back, Father Nels.
Hey, it's great to be back. Thank you.
It's great to have you. And today we thought we'd bring you on because we have a more serious discussion, not so comical today. So for those of you who are tuning in for Push the Button for laughs, this may not be the right one. Although, who knows, we'll probably find a way to goof around anyway. But today we wanted to talk about something that is a very serious issue. It affects millions of Americans as well as millions of people around the world, and that is, of course, suicide. There are many varying degrees of perspectives on this particular happenstance. I don't mean to sound light on it. I mean, it's not a light situation. It's obviously one of the most drastic decisions anybody can make. And yeah, I mean, a lot is going on. There's from back in the day when we have stories of, say, Dr. Jack Kevorkian with doctor-assisted suicides, to people literally just doing it on their own, to weird laws that make it illegal for someone to kill themselves, which never made sense to me, because how can you arrest someone who successfully completed that crime? But
so let's sort of unpack this a little bit.
Yeah, it's a heavy one, and we've been meaning to talk about it, obviously, as far back as when Robin Williams, unfortunately, famously committed suicide. We started talking about it. We realized how kind of heavy it was and guttural it is, and I knew that we would definitely come back to this again, and here we are.
And I think that the Robin Williams situation is completely different. We're talking about here today.
Well, I'd like to touch on all of it, though.
Physician-assisted suicide. Well, absolutely. We absolutely will.
Yeah.
But I think first and foremost, I would like to talk about the case for physician-assisted suicide.
Okay. The legal situation that we have politically.
Where a person is suffering, they've been diagnosed with a grievous illness, that they have given a very grim outcome, low chance of survival, if any at all, and they're suffering, and they would like the ability to choose to make it a little more peaceful, a little more palatable, palliative. So right now we have 6 in the union that allow physician-assisted suicide, PA.
6 states in the union. Do you know which ones they are?
Oregon, Washington, Montana, Vermont, New Hampshire, New Mexico, and currently they're debating the possibility in the state of New Jersey, I believe.
So interestingly enough, kind of the western portion of the country.
Now, the patient has to be of sound mind.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be confirmed by a doctor.
This is the current law.
Yes.
Okay.
And they must be diagnosed with a terminal illness. We're not talking about somebody who just feels bad or
right.
has been diagnosed with depression, clinical depression. This person has to have been diagnosed with a terminal illness and given a grim outcome.
Sure.
So, how do we feel about this? Thoughts?
Well, I got to say that I'm opposed to it, and I guess even starting out with the definitions and the various restrictions that they have on the situations, conditions under which it's permitted, I would begin by asking the question: why those conditions? Why not other conditions? Why does it have to be defined in the way it does? And then why have we changed from those conditions, or now it's permissible, when before it would be something that we would oppose? Because I would bring into question even the idea that how do we define sound mind? Because I would say that when a person starts having those thoughts, feelings, whatever the situation might be that presents those ideas, those thoughts into somebody's that I would like to terminate my own life, that in and of itself would begin to call into question the soundness. Because I'm sure there's people who have gone through periods where it might be from certainly the situation of a medical condition, but there were periods where people were going through great fear. And it might be something from a medical condition, fear, but it might be something else, fear of the future, fear of what they're going to have. There's all kinds of things that spur these ideas in our minds. And I would say that all those would call into question our ability to make a clear, sound judgment, even in and of itself.
Well, what we're talking about here specifically is a situation where a doctor says, Father Nels, you have 2 weeks to live. Well, whatever, you got 3 months to live.
Right, yeah.
For a month, you're going to be feeling okay. At 2 months, start shitting blood. 3 months, you're going to start feeling like you're drowning. And you're going to suffer. Personal experience. My father was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. Well, he wasn't diagnosed. He wasn't given the physicians attending to him did not tell him that he had no chance of survival, even though he had stage 4 lung cancer, which if you look statistically, I think they say 3% of the people that are diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer survive past the first year.
Well, I'm just curious, why did they not tell him?
I'm not sure, but they told him that there's always a possibility that through chemo and radiation or a miracle that this disease could be reversed. And so he spent 2.5 years. I would say they weren't good years. But I think he enjoyed the fact that he was around. I think he was glad that, yes, he didn't feel good all the time. He was nauseous, tired, but he enjoyed the fact that he was still alive. For the last 3 weeks, however, I think that changed significantly. He couldn't go to the bathroom. We had to change. He was wearing adult diapers. We had to change those. Couldn't take care of himself at all. He was in an enormous amount of pain, bedridden, no energy, nausea. And I think, personally, from that experience, if he would have said, I mean, at that point, after seeing somebody suffer for 2.5 years, you come to the this person he's gonna die. He's not gonna be here anymore. And you almost get to the point where you want him to die because you don't want to see them suffer.
Right.
And I'm sure that many of our listeners out there have had this similar experience with an elderly family member.
Absolutely.
That, look, Grandma was 90 years old. She lived a wonderful life. It's time for her to go. And so in that situation, my father had come to me and said, like, I don't want to, I see where the way this is going. I don't want to suffer anymore. I'm going to die anyway. I wouldn't have a problem with him. Now, of course, it would still be sad.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't be a happy experience. But if I look back on the situation, would it have been nice to have Dad sitting up and lucid and talking to buddy when he drank a cup of tea and went to sleep? Or, you know, in our situation, it was a constant. Every 15, 20 minutes, we were running into the bedroom to see if he was okay, and then eventually his death. And it wasn't a pretty thing. So
yeah. Well, and I'm thinking where doctors run into difficulty is because of their Hippocratic oath. It's almost like fundamentally they can't do it. Now, I'm sure there's doctors out there who don't have a problem with it, and that's a whole different issue. But there is the whole, do no harm mentality. And I understand that when someone's in pain, that's harm. But I think a doctor's fundamental position is to do everything possible to save the life and to extend the life. And I mean, and we could go for hours on whether or not a life is supposed to be extended. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Father Nels, I'm sure that you've got an opinion on that as well. I mean, just as a person who's a Christian, I know that there's this fine line of, do I go when I believe that my God wants me to go, or do I want the machines keeping me going? And so there's a whole other side to this as well. But as far as
the topic for another podcast.
Exactly. But as far as the a doctor, the phrase I'm always hearing with people in my personal experiences with elderly family members and things like that, it's always, at this point, we just do everything we can to keep them as comfortable as possible. That's what we hear a lot. And is that part of the Hippocratic Oath? Is that part of the solemn swear that all doctors make, that when they try to save a life, once someone has reached a certain point, then it's at least let's just try to make them feel comfortable. So then you get into these people who are at home, because I have yet to see even the legal assisted suicide, and I'm sure it does happen. I haven't visually seen enough information, but I haven't seen it happen in a hospital on the premises. It's usually at someone's private residence, right?
Yeah, it's basically from everything that I've seen, is that it'll be away from the hospitals, but a doctor does have to be the one to give them the medications that they will use, and then once they're given, then it's at the person's discretion as to when to use it. Yeah.
If they want to use it at all, they don't have to change their mind at the last minute and say, you know what, I'm just going to wait this out, see what happens.
Yeah. And, I absolutely no disrespect is meant towards anyone who has taken this decision and have crossed, that line. But I will say that there is and I'm only saying this because I can't think of another word for it. But in my personal opinion, and I value that that's all it is, it, to me, seems almost like a level of selfishness. Even
selfishness for the.
Let me finish my point first, though, because okay. I understand. I totally understand why you have something to say.
Yeah.
And we'll even bring up the interesting documentary that you referenced to me, the How to Die in Oregon. If you have Netflix, you can watch it. It's very interesting piece. One of the common things I hear a lot of people say, I don't want to have to put that burden on my family to have to take care of me and change my diapers. And I understand that there's a level of embarrassment and, the whole dignity aspect that is very heavily talked about when fighting for that law. But there's a part of me that kind of says, my infant child doesn't have that choice when they're, crapping themselves and whatnot. It's my, I wanted to have a child. I'm the one who takes care of that child. It's my choice to want to be there for that child or neglect that child. Now, I understand that as an adult, we have rights, we have all these things, and there's that, I want to have my dignity. And believe me, again, I'm not disrespecting anybody. I understand that desire. I really do. But to me, if it was somebody that I loved who said, I don't want to put you through this, my knee-jerk reaction is, well, it's me who has to go through it with you. It's my decision if I want to be there for you or not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can certainly understand that.
And I can see where that's selfish too. So I'm not oblivious to that.
Yeah, well, I know certainly in my life as a priest, I've been with a lot of families that have been with family members at the end of life and having to make all the decisions from everything from removing life support to deciding on no, we've decided not to do chemo for the 5th time or whatever some of the families have had to do, to what's happening with grandma, we really don't know, to, dad just had a stroke and we don't know what he would want, and going through a lot of these decisions. And these are the types of conversations that we'll have. And unfortunately, a lot of times families haven't had these conversations ahead of time because a lot of them are afraid to speak with mom or dad or grandma, grandpa, or even spouse about these types of things. And so, just kind of even pulling it back a little bit farther, that's something I encourage families to do, is to have those types of conversations early on, just so that at least the closest family member is aware of the wishes of the individual. But then they can have those conversations too, where, like what you're talking about, even though I know that you're kind of embarrassed as far as what this would mean for us as a family, I love you to the point where I'm willing to go into the messiness of helping care for you. So I always encourage, families to have these types of conversations ahead of time. And it's not something that, especially we as Americans, are terribly comfortable doing. Not many people like going there.
Well, and just leaning on somebody else. And I understand that because we're very tough. I don't need anybody for anything, and I'm going to...
I don't think there's a person on planet Earth, well, there probably are, but very few, nobody who has a heart who thinks, boy, I really don't want to take care of Dad because...
I mean, maybe.
Maybe there are, but I don't know anybody that's gone through that type of scenario, and if they have, they haven't outwardly expressed it.
Sure.
I certainly didn't feel that way myself. I would have done anything for my dad in taking care of him. And I know people say that a lot. These people who are at the end of their life, look, I don't want to put this burden on anybody else.
Yeah.
But I am talking about I'm not talking about somebody who is afraid of, I am perfectly healthy right now, as far as I can tell.
Right.
If I'm diagnosed with an illness that's going to take my life, and I'm just going to be a little tired, I don't believe I'm going to consider ending my life because of that. I'll let nature take course. I'm talking specifically about people who are in just
pain.
I mean, the worst possible pain, the worst misery. That's what I'm talking about. And I think that's what the majority of these people who are proponents of this law are speaking about. Yes, you are going to have, and this is where you get into this slippery slope argument, which I'm not a big fan of.
Sure.
Because everything is a slippery slope. Why do we do anything?
Right.
But these situations, and you said before, like, it's sort of selfish, and I know what you're saying, and I know, but is it the person being selfish, or is it you who's being selfish?
Right, and I pointed out that it's selfish on both ends, and I'm aware of that.
But is it selfish for me to not want to be in the worst possible misery? Possible misery I can possibly imagine. I would like to end that.
Yeah. No, and again, like I said, I don't begrudge anyone for wanting it to stop. I don't. I totally understand. If you're in pain, the only thing that you're thinking of in that moment is make this stop. But
and it's easy for us as armchair quarterbacks.
Yeah.
To sit back and say, like, if I were in a situation, I think I'd just stick it out. I think I'd be tough until you're faced with that scenario. This is why people who are captured by foreign armies think they go through all kinds of training that they're gonna, they're gonna hold fast and they're not going to break under torture or questioning, and they almost always do.
Right.
Well, and I think with this, one thing to make aware of is the distinction between physician-assisted suicide and hospice care, because hospice care is something that I'm a big proponent of. And for those who aren't aware of what hospice care is it's when a person has gotten to a point where medical care is not going to do much help to either extend the person's life or really to counter whatever illness that the person has. It's a type of care where they work specifically to minimize or remove the pain, but nothing is done to extend the person's life. So in the cases, in these types of situations, it would be what they call palliative care, removal of as much of the pain.
Right, so they give you pain meds and stuff and just kind of let your body do its thing, right?
What if it's gotten to the point where the pain meds don't work?
Okay.
Because there was a recent case over in the UK where a woman's daughter, born with 3 horrible diseases, I don't remember what they were, septicemia, mono, or there were 3 very devastating diseases that this girl was born with. She was basically in almost a vegetative state, extraordinary amounts of pain, and she was on a steady dose of morphine and ketamine, and neither of those drugs, the cocktail, the combination of those 2 drugs did nothing. She would scream through all hours of the night,
right,
day long. She was just in constant pain, and her mother fought to have her, fought to end her life, which is another topic.
Yeah.
I mean, but in that case,
it wouldn't work though, because you'd have to have the sound mind, right?
In that particular case, right? And the thing in that situation was the state or the government there finally agreed to allow her to end the child's life. They did so in a way that was just absolutely disgusting to me. They removed her feeding tubes and
let her starve to death.
Liquids, and she starved for 14 or 17 days. She did, which is torturous. And obviously, she's lucid enough to feel pain, so she suffered. She suffered for a long period of time. I'm not for that.
So why? And again, this whole thing touches on so many pieces of gray area. But so why, say, not put that child into a coma? Because we can induce coma.
Yeah.
But see, then there's the concern of, do they still feel everything while in the coma? They just can't tell us.
Yeah, with that one, there's a whole host of questions that at least right now we really don't even have the data or the knowledge even to answer. Unfortunately, a lot of those questions that people would want.
Yeah.
So why are we? I mean, let's boil this down to why it is that we're so concerned that a person either lives or dies. In that situation, what's the like I said, if I am in so much pain that I don't want to live, there's nothing that is going to give me any kind of respite from this pain. Why is it unacceptable?
Not even knowing that it's, and again, I'm not in that pain, so I don't know, and I recognize that, so I understand that my words hold very little credit. But I have an honest question, which is, even what if knowing that it's temporary? Like, wouldn't that give any type of reprieve? Like, this is only going to be for a period of time.
But what if it's not? I'm saying in the situation that, yeah, everybody can go through and endure some pain for a specified period of time. This is never going to get better, as far as we can tell.
See, and this is where it gets weird, because when you really get down to it, and this is such a hard thing to talk about, because I know that someone is going to think I'm being insensitive, or they're going to think that I'm not being compassionate, which kind of the same thing, but I totally am. But it's with the reality of the way we live our lives. I mean, what's to say somebody doesn't just commit suicide anyway?
Well, I'll say that from my own perspective, because my ministry as a priest right now is lived out teaching in the classroom. And one of the things that obviously for teaching, that there's appropriately a extreme hypersensitivity to even the word suicide when a student or any adult, but especially as a teacher when there's a student that even begins to hint at such a thing. We have a lot of practices and we have a lot of policies in place that rightfully we legally can't ignore a student's acknowledgement of even thinking in that way. And I know for myself as a society, one of my concerns is for my students, because I know I've had students through the years that have mentioned that to me, especially because I'm a priest and will come, probably talk to me about some things that they may not speak with other teachers about, and having to do that. And when we start creating, especially legally approved avenues for people to do this, regardless of the circumstances, which the desire to be compassionate for them, it really opens up doors in the minds of some of these students. Well, it's acceptable in that person's case, with the way that I'm perceiving myself right now, with the way that I'm perceiving right now, with the way that I'm perceiving, my friendships in my life. Is this now an option for me, even if it's not legal?
To me, this is that slippery slope argument, which I don't that we should not do something because there's a possibility that something else might. If that, what we're talking about right now, what people are dealing with right now is this. If that is this end of life, I'm in so much pain, I'm going to die anyway, whether it's a week or a month or 3 months, but I can't deal with this anymore. And I sort of feel like, well, if those types of issues come up in the future, like, we'll deal with them.
Well, that's where I would say that here's where I'd put this outside of the argument of slippery slope, is only because we do know factually that, especially in a, let's say, a particular school setting, that when there is a student who's died from suicide in that situation, that the possibility of copycat increases so much. So we do that, especially when one is visibly publicized or it has an effect, that it does have a documented effect on the community. And then the reality is, we are a society, as much as we certainly are individuals, and as a country, we hold up the individual and the individual's rights very highly. We are an interlaced group of human beings. It's part of the nature of us as human beings that we form communities, we form relationships. And now with the ability to communicate, with, let's say, even the case of YouTube, with the most recent public case of physician-assisted suicide, her video got viewed something like 7 million times or something like that, and it's been a conversation, because one of the courses I teach at our school is morality. And the next day, I said, "How are you guys doing?" And immediately 2 hands went up. And, "Father, can we talk about this?" And I have to address it, because it has had impact. And so while I certainly I agree with you that slippery slope argument is not only weak, it can be a fallacy to create proofs of other things. I would say that we've got things other than this possibly could create this in the future to actually have data that shows that because we're interlaced as human beings and communities, this does actually have an effect on the mindset of people around them. So that would just be my kind of response to that. And so when I talk about these concerns, that it creates new ideas in the minds of people, and particularly, younger people that are more susceptible to ideas, and it's just part of their natural growth process too, that they're going to be thinking through things in new ways too. So just one of my concerns is not even on a religious or spiritual argument, but just a social argument, I guess.
But so what you're basically saying, and I don't mean to try to simplify it, but I just want to make sure I understand. What you're saying is that it's not viewed as a good idea because it would give the idea to other people. Is that what you're saying?
Essentially, and that's not. I wouldn't say that that's my primary argument against it, but I would say that is something that has to be considered for us as a society if we're going to start allowing that. What is going to be the wider impact as well?
Well, I mean, as a kid growing up, we always heard, suicide prevention, things like that. So, think about, people who do it don't think about, what the outcome is for those around you. And suicide only hurts the people who you leave behind and things like that. But again, Ken's, and I got to support him on this one. He's really trying to hone in on the, critical care situation, grandma, dad, mom, whatever, is at that end stage of their life. And you're right, you really have no say as to how long it would be if it was left to natural devices. And if somebody's in constant turmoil and pain. But again, I keep kind of coming back to this mentality of if I was in a situation where I was in pain and my desire to make it stop does not necessarily mean I want to stop living. It just means I want that pain to stop, that immediate cease.
Right, but what I'm talking about is a situation where this is the only known cure for this ailment.
For this pain.
Like I said, that young lady over in the UK was on a cocktail of ketamine. And I mean, you don't get much. I think that's pretty much, you're maxed out as far as pain relief goes. In our current situation, doctors might be able to come up with something in the future. They haven't yet. So, do we allow this girl to torture? Now, let me pose it to you this way. So, we've all been sort of paying attention to the Middle East recently. ISIS has been beheading people.
Okay.
They haven't done it in a while, thankfully, but
that we're aware of.
Well, the thing is that they've been doing this forever.
Thousands of years.
Just finally in front of our eyes. So now we see it and we see how horrifying it is and how horrible it is. Now, I think when most people see the news and they see that a British journalist or an American journalist was beheaded by ISIS, they think, so they put them over a block and they chop their head off with a sword. This is not how this happens. These people take a small knife and they slowly, very painfully saw the person's head off, ensuring that this person suffers as much as they possibly can. I have no idea what kind of torture they suffer before at the hands of these people, but let's just take the beheading as is. That's all that happens. So now you're in a cell. You've been captured by ISIS. You're in a cell. And you are told by one of the people, tomorrow we're going to have cameras rolling and we're going to cut your head off. We're going to hack your head off with this little knife. That person leaves and Short time later, somebody comes in, sets down a cup of juice, says, you can drink this juice and you'll just fall asleep and you'll die that way. You'll die peacefully. Now, is that viewed as an act of compassion, or is that viewed as just as bad? And are you a coward, or are you selfish for not wanting to endure the pain of getting your head hacked off? You're going to die either way. One way, you can suffer the most... I can't think of suffering any...
Well, yeah, I mean, but the problem with your scenario is that you've laid out two options. Those options are viable at that point. It's you can either get your head cut off because you don't have a choice, we're going to cut your head off, or you can drink this drink where you feel nothing.
And if the scenario of the person who's got terminal cancer and they're going to die, there is no way around it.
I see what you're saying.
And they are going to suffer. There are two options. You can either wait it out and then die, or you can drink the juice, you'll go to sleep.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that it's only in 6 states where this option is on the table.
Incidentally, we have 32 states that allow the death penalty. So we have 32 states that find it perfectly acceptable to kill people that don't want to be killed. I mean, I'm sure that there are certain scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely takes us down a completely different rabbit hole.
Yes.
But I see the irony there. I do.
David Voxmullen here to tell you all about what's new this fall on the DVM Podcast Empire. The new TV season is here, and we've got a great lineup for you. New shows like Gotham, The Flash, Forever, iZombie, Better Call Saul, Constantine, The Messengers, and Wayward Pines. We've also got new DVMPE original shows like Movie Mojo Monthly, Loot the Room, TV Resurrection, The Comic Book Podcast, Fangirl Zone, Push the Button, and The Windy City Rejects. And yes, all of your favorites are coming back as well, like the Podcast of Interest, Arrowcast, American Horrorcast, The New Who Podcast, Game of Thrones, Grimm, Once Upon a Time, The Walking Dead, and so much more. Of course, absolutely none of this would be possible without the support of our listeners just like you. So please consider your continuation of support by telling all of your friends about us, shopping online through our Amazon portals, or simply by donating directly at dvmpe.com. The DVM Podcast Empire. We don't just watch TV, we live it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back here talking about physician-assisted suicide and suicide in general. And we've been talking with my co-host, David Voxmullen, and my friend, Father Nels Jangle. And
I am not Ken's friend, just his co-host.
As you were, my friend and co-host. And we've got another guest joining this time. We've got the distinguished Reverend John P. Floater. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ken. It's a pleasure to be here. My background is a little bit. I'm a Catholic priest, and I'm a professor of moral theology at the St. Paul Seminary School of Divinity at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. And one of the big classes that I teach is bioethics. And just recently, I was interviewed by Care 11 News here in town to give a little response to Brittany Maynard, who took her own life out in Oregon this last week. And so I've been asked to talk a lot about this lately, so happy to come and talk with all of you today.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and for all of us around the world who didn't have access to that news report, we'd love to hear what you thought.
Sure. Well, for those who don't know her full story, the basics of it is Brittany was diagnosed with a horrible brain tumor, and she's a 29-year-old young woman, vivacious and had a lot of life ahead of her. And when she received this diagnosis and it was described to her what the process of her dying would be like, she decided that would be too hard on her and her family. And so she moved from California to Oregon, so she could take advantage of the physician-assisted suicide law there in Oregon and the Death with Dignity program there. And so was able to then, through the help of a doctor, received a large dose of barbiturates and ended up this past weekend, I believe on her first or second, taking her own life rather than go through the suffering of the ending stages of her terminal brain cancer. And So on the news, they just asked me, Father, what's your reaction? And I just said, I'm very sad. First of all, that a woman like this, a young woman especially, would have a horrible diagnosis like this, a horrible cancer, and have to face quite a bit of suffering and the great toll that it is on her and her family. Anyone of goodwill, anyone of compassion for others would, recognize that that's a great, great hardship and really have their heart go out to them and want to help and support and suffer with them. But I was sad that she took her own life. Now, I'm coming from an obvious bias, right? So I'm a Catholic priest, and I come from a Christian background, right? Catholic background. And so for us, one of the fundamental things is just the gift of our lives is a gift from God, and it's nothing that we should throw away. And even in the final moments, too, because of, our belief in Jesus Christ, that suffering is not meaningless. It need not be meaningless. And in those final moments, it's a great gift in some ways. Now, it's a great hardship. But it also can be a great gift for a family to be with someone in the final moments, to love and be loved, to suffer with one another. And in those moments, it allows opportunities for reconciliation, reaching out to young members in the family, and just to die well. And so euthanasia deprives someone of that moment.
So I'm coming at it from a different perspective, though. I don't believe that life is a gift of God. There are tons of people out there who don't.
Regardless of your belief, Ken, I have a question though. Do you believe that life is valued?
Absolutely. I think you should take every step necessary to preserve your life and the lives of those around you.
Okay.
However, I believe that in certain circumstances,
I didn't want to derail you. I wanted to make sure that you at least felt that life was important.
They're always derailing. Now I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
No, but should my, I understand we all, but we live in this melting pot of all these various beliefs and non-belief and stuff like that. So while I completely understand where you're coming from, and I understand that if you want to suffer because of whatever belief you have, I support that right. I support that. Why can that not also be extended to me?
Fair enough. So I go to the faith, position just because that's what I naturally do as a priest. I talk faith stuff all the time. I talk Jesus.
Right.
I talk that all the time, and forgive me if I'm speaking only Catholic language.
No, that's perfect. I'm just asking you.
Yeah. No. So I'm just prefacing this, but the fundamental question or principle at root here is, what is the value of human life? And so, for example, what makes a human being different from an animal? What is the root and core of human dignity? And so the big question is, does a human life have value apart from a person's use to society or function or ability to engage in certain activities?
Right, and who really gets to decide when it loses its value?
Exactly.
Again, I hate to keep hammering this point, but I feel maybe, again, armchair quarterback here, I'm not put in this situation, but I've felt great pain before. I also knew that, as we talked earlier, that pain was going to be temporary.
Right.
I've had surgeries before that were painful, and illnesses, and things like that. And I knew that they were going to be short-lived, and I was going to get over it. I'm at the point here, hypothetically, where I am shitting blood on a moment-to-moment basis. I am filling my diapers. I cannot change said diapers. I am bedridden. I have bed sores. I have pain. The woman in the documentary How to Die in Oregon, she had this fluid that was building up in her abdomen.
Right.
And they were removing the fluid. She was in just extraordinary amounts of. I'm talking about these scenarios. I am going to die. I can have a little dignity. And I'm not even worried about dignity. I'm worried about...
Well, a lot of people are, though. I mean, I think the law was called the Death with Dignity law.
Right. Comfort. You know what? I'd rather... the lady... Again, I'm going to reference the documentary. The lady was able to go around her house with her daughter and say, and now, if you're diagnosed with an illness, and you've got, say, 3 months to live, and you might be able to do these things anyway. but she was able to go around her house and say, like, I want you to have this, and I want Aunt Sarah to have that. And she said she folded up her scarves with her daughter and gave away all of her jewelry and things like that. But the point that I'm trying to make is that, like, I'm in so much pain, I'm going to die. I would rather have it be comfortable. We can sit around, we can talk with the people that love me versus the other scenario that I just laid out.
Yeah, I would rather be comfortable too, and certainly I don't think anyone would have. Even those who are against, those who are against euthanasia are not in favor of people taking on heroic suffering. So, of course, people should be given every palliative care measure that they can to put them at ease. If a person chooses to suffer, great. That's fine. I pray for them and I want to help them. But the Church, Catholic Church at least, does not require that everyone suffer greatly. I mean, modern medicine is wonderful, and we need to use every means available to alleviate suffering. Absolutely. The point is, we should not be, though, directly taking a person's life. We should help them in those moments, but not directly takes a person's life, and that's because dignity is not something that's lost whether you crap in a diaper or not.
Well, and one of the things that Ken brought up earlier before you joined us was that there have been a few instances that we've documented where pain medication doesn't seem to work, where we've thrown everything at a particular patient and they're still in pain. So what do we do in those instances?
We do our best.
But what is that? Medically, scientifically, spiritually, what is the best?
I see what you're saying. That you're saying there's
I'm honestly I'm just opening doors to open doors. I don't have a personal stake in any of this. I'm just opening doors to ask.
There's what you're saying. What I'm getting from you is that there's this virtue in suffering. And I totally agree that, like, with some types of suffering, we talked about this on we did an episode where I was bullied as a kid and as a teen a little bit. And I feel like it's made me stronger as a person. I'm talking this scenario, your suffering is not going to make you a better person. Like, it's not in my, from where I stand. You guys
go ahead.
Believe in the afterlife,
sure,
and that there's a possibility that you'll be rewarded in the afterlife for having gone through suffering. But
well, in those circumstances, certainly there's much that can be done with sedatives and things like this. So, in those moments where nothing works, certainly they can be sedated and be given some rest that way. But the biggest thing is we just shouldn't ever directly take a person's life. Right. So either a physician doing it or us just doing it ourselves, right?
Let me answer one, Ken. So from a faith perspective, that's how I would answer the value of human life. But from your own perspective, or so obviously I don't always ask you to speak for yourself in that. What is the intrinsic value of human life that you obviously hold and affirm, and what is that, and what is its source, and how is it, or what is that intrinsic value that we have as human life?
I'm here. I don't want to die. I don't want to be in pain. And I find that, I look around me and I find enjoyment from having other people around me feel those same things and be in that same state. I mean, other than that, I don't. Yeah. What are you getting at?
I'm not trying to get at anything. It's one of those kind of fundamental questions, I think, that really is connected to this. That's connected to, well, everything that we've kind of been getting at with euthanasia, suicide in general, death penalty, as we mentioned that other state, really comes down to that fundamental question about first off, I guess that every person has to answer: is there something human life that has an intrinsic value that is there. So that's, I think, one of the first questions that every person who's dealing with, facing, suicide, death penalty, whatever it might be. And then, too, what is the source of that?
Life is preferable to death, as far as I know. I mean, I don't know what it's like after death. I don't think anybody does. Some claim to. It's questionable, in my opinion. But yeah, life is preferable to death. So, as I said, I'm not saying that people, if they're feeling down or depressed or sad, that it's okay to take your life, or to have somebody push the button for you.
Ooh,
that was a good plug.
But yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's I think what every person is going to have to answer almost before they even go down the question of euthanasia, of death penalty, or anything that tampers with human life. But they need to ask the question: what is the source of that? Why does it have value? Why is human life valued above other types of life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. If my dog is diagnosed with some type of terminal illness, and I know that he's going to be suffering, and I can see him suffering, almost everybody is not going to let nature take its course and not going to let the dog suffer. You're going to take it to the vet, and it's going to be euthanized. Yeah.
Well,
peacefully.
Indeed. Well, and, I think a lot of people listening are probably hunters too, and see no issue in
this guy
and this guy. And see in hunting. So then too, the question would have to be asked: okay, what's the intrinsic difference between human life and animal life? And then where does that difference come from? And what are the, I guess, I don't know the right word, but consequences of that change how I interact with human life versus how I interact with animal life or plant life or whatever other types of life are out there?
I think we're speciesists, sort of. I mean, we are humans and we experience things, and we can assume that other people go through those same things. We can communicate with each other to, we can't necessarily communicate with the deer. If we could, and that deer would tell us, like, this really sucks. And, I have a personal relationship with God myself. And we would probably view killing deer and deer hunting in a different light, right?
Well, it certainly would be an interesting conversation. I do communicate with the deer from, usually about 100 yards out.
It's a one-way conversation.
How Native American of you all. So, just kidding.
Wow.
Just kidding. Just trying to bring it back down. You guys were getting too late.
Did you say Native American?
I did.
I think that's racist, but I don't know.
Hey.
That's for talk about that another time.
Another podcast. Okay, so I will say this in defense of the faith argument, or at least in the belief in God, as far as that being a basis for your ethics. And Ken and I, we've already discussed these on previous shows, where it doesn't necessarily mean that the rest of the world has to adhere to the same level of ethics. But from a faith perspective, where I'm coming from, I feel like everything up to the point of death is really not the issue here. The only time faith comes into it for me is, whether or not I believe you go somewhere after death. Prior to that, it's still a political issue. It's still an American issue that I'm really wanting to kind of get to the root of. I'm going to throw an interesting story at you.
Okay.
A handful of years ago, my mother was diagnosed with actually two different diseases. These are lifetime diseases that don't ever go away. These are diseases that cause great physical pain. These are not diseases that would kill her. It is just a disease that will be with her for the rest of her life until she dies. And, she was, in her mid-40s when she was diagnosed, so she still had a lot of life ahead of her. But she was in a lot of pain. And you'll note for the future here that I'm using past tense. she was in constant pain. I would get phone calls at like 3 a.m. in the morning from my mother. I would get phone calls at 3 a.m. from my mom saying, I just want to die. This pain is too great. I can't handle this. I wish there was a way I could end this pain. And this went on for years. I truly believe that had she been given the legal opportunity to end her life in order to stop the pain that she was in, I absolutely believe she would have done it. That being said, she had not done so. And we can call it whatever we want. The pastors can call it miracles. Doctors can say remission. But that pain, after many years, had ceased. Now, she's not 100% pain-free today. But for some reason, she is in far less pain today than she was 5 years ago. And she's enjoying her life again. And I understand that everybody is unique. But had she taken that option, had it been legal, at that time, it would have literally stolen the life that she's experiencing right now away from her.
That's a great story because of the fact that she did hang in there. She did pull through it.
I think there was a little bit of fear. I think it was the fear of death was still great. For her, the unknown, what was going to happen, what would or would not happen after she died. There is the huge stigma that the church puts on people of faith that, if you kill yourself, you go to hell. So, of course, there was fear there. But it gets to, and she has verbalized to me on many conversations that it gets to a point where the pain is so great that fear starts to diminish, that it really doesn't matter. And that's interesting.
However, she wasn't diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, right? She wasn't threatened. She wasn't diagnosed with a terminal.
Only because I don't know enough about the disease, and I want to respect that. I don't want to name it on the show, but it was a disease that the diagnosis was clear that it would never go away. It would never be healed. It would never stop. It would just be.
There's a difference in having.
I mean, she couldn't move. She couldn't get out of her bed. She couldn't walk. She couldn't function without copious amounts of drugs. And that would just be enough to get her to get up to maybe go to the washroom. But she could not function without ridiculous amounts of drugs. And I can honestly say today she is not on any of those drugs anymore. So something did change for her that no one foresaw. Her doctors did not foresee it. I certainly did not see it.
But this is not the law that is in question. The law that's in question is somebody who's going to die, and there is no alternative.
Right.
You are going to die. You've been given a death sentence.
But where's the line? Where's the line? Where's the line when eventually, once it becomes a law, and we in this wonderful country like to keep updating and amending and changing laws?
You're talking the slippery slope. Now you're going down that slippery slope.
So you're saying that...
Anything. Right. Why would we let women vote? Because next thing they're going to want to get jobs and stuff.
As long as they're in the kitchen making me dinner, they can do whatever way I want. I'm just kidding. I cook for my wife, by the way. I'm just teasing.
So, yeah, I'm not talking about if the thing about this medication too. When you go through the process and you're prescribed the medication, you take it home with you. It's there in case. It's not like, well, I got a fever today. Oh, I got a little bit of a headache. Time to pop the medicine. This is like when people are going through the end stages.
Now, wait a minute, Ken. In that same documentary we watched, How to Die in Oregon, there was that gentleman. They didn't talk about him for very long, but briefly, there was that gentleman who was in pain, and he had requested permission from the state, as you do, went through the proper channels, and they denied him. And then eventually they ended up, because they said that his case wasn't terminal, I think it was, very similar to what your argument is. and then something happened where they got exposed for denying him, and then they reversed their decision and they allowed him. Do you see what I mean? Like, still that...
No, you're talking... They wouldn't...
guy with the baseball cap.
Right, they wouldn't pay for his
medication.
He didn't have a terminal illness. The illness would eventually kill him if he didn't have it operated on.
Okay.
They wouldn't pay for the operation until...
I just remember he was denied for some reason that they had, and then they reverted.
Yeah, they initially... They basically said, we'll pay for your palliative care, and your end-of-life care, we won't pay for the surgery.
I see. Okay.
Well,
then forget that whole point, because I misunderstood it.
We'll kill you. We'll let you kill yourself, but we're not going to do the surgery.
Yeah, that's weird.
Which, I'm not okay with that scenario. If there is a possibility that we can have surgery, that we can perform surgery on you and you can be cured or live your life to a certain degree, we need to do that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about this extreme circumstances where you're going to die.
If I could ask a question, now your mother who had these diseases and it went away, those years when she was
she still technically has the disease for the record.
The symptoms have gone away, right?
The amount of pain is nowhere near where it was completely debilitating for her. Yeah.
Okay, great. So
she still sits in a chair all day long. She can't, she doesn't, but she gets out now. She goes out. She enjoys life. She sees movies. She does shows. She eats, and so she does get to enjoy. It's a different life than from the woman I grew up with, but it's still something compared to the life she was living 5 years ago.
Sure. So not wishing that she would return to the pain period there.
Right.
During that time, though, did her life have some meaning to it, even amidst the pain?
Selfishly, it had meaning to me. But if you would have asked her, she would have absolutely admitted, absolutely not. She was done. Because she saw no potential change. There was no doctor told her that there was even the possibility that it would go away. It was, this is your life for the rest of your life. And that, maybe not terminally, but mentally, that's enough to tell you, this is what you are going to feel 24/7 for the rest of your days. And it was unbearable for her.
Right. Well, I would just say, respond to Ken's constant question here. Why should we be concerned about this? And I'm not trying to impose my morality on others, but there's certain basic goods that I want everyone to hold to, right? So I'm trained in philosophy, so forgive me, and you can ask me to translate, but this is the only language I know how to speak, so I'll do my best.
We'll stick with English if that's okay.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, I can also do it in Spanish if you'd like.
English.
No, so
speak American, will you?
Yeah. So anyhow, Aristotle.
We're off to a great start.
Yeah. So he has a number of great philosophical works, including the Nicomachean Ethics and the Politics, right? And so the word politics comes from the Greek word for polis, which is the city, right?
Okay.
And the way Aristotle conceived of the human being is that we're political animals. But that doesn't mean that we're made for voting and giving empty promises and things like this, right? It means that we're made to be live in a polis. We're made to be with other people. Right? And now he wasn't a Christian at all, right? He was living hundreds of years before Christ. But he recognized something, just looking at what a human being is, we should be interacting with each other, helping each other, living in communities together. And an individual has more value beyond they perceive themselves, but they have a value to the whole society, the polis in the Greek world. And for us, and what I would say, and as you mentioned, right? Your mom had a great value to you, even in those times of suffering, and did a great service to you, whether even in the midst of great pain. This is what we want society to be, people to be contributing and helping each other. And so, whether you believe and share with me in my Catholic belief that life is a gift from God, hopefully you would agree that one, have a dignity, and two, that dignity in how we are as human beings is that we should be reaching out and be in connection with others in some way, and that kind of how we're knit together in a big web of society, even the people in great suffering can still contribute to that society and hopefully will want to contribute to that. And for them to take their own life, and so for the case of your mother, she would have been depriving others of something really valuable.
But again, and to be respectful in defense of those who are in pain. And again, and if you were to have this conversation with my mother 5 years ago, she would say, I know, I'm sorry, I love you, but this hurts too much. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, and it's a hard thing to refute, someone's personal experience, right?
Right. And don't get me wrong, I hated it. Every time she said it, it broke my heart. And again, I'm so very appreciative of the time that she and I have now. But while we were going through it as a family, it was like, oh, I hate hearing my mom say these things. But I couldn't feel what she felt.
Right.
So how could I say yes, you're right, or no, you're wrong? I didn't want my mom to go away. And I think a lot of families get into this where, when mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or aunt or somebody they love is at that end stage of their life, or terminal, or cancer is the biggest one that we can visually see what happens. ALS is another one, and Parkinson's and things like that. But when you have somebody in that stage, you absolutely selfishly go, I don't want to lose them. I'll take them any way I can, is kind of the mentality of the family or the loved ones. It's just, I don't want to lose them, but it's I. Do you know what I mean?
Fair enough. Just speaking a non-phonic language, though, it just seems to me some kind of basic, a fundamental axiom of envision who we are as human beings to say that we have a dignity, and that we do have a connection to others.
So, what you're saying is that all human life should be not only respected, but never take another human being's life.
Absolutely, that's what I would hold, and
for any circumstance.
Well, innocent human life, I would make a distinction, right? So, for example, in the real defense of the common good, right, the real society that we have, the obvious example of, because it's easy, right, is World War II. You need to sometimes take life to preserve society, the common good, right? So hopefully all of us agree that it was a just war in World War II. It's one of the last clear-cut just wars. But in those wars, you have enemy combatants, and so those are not innocent human life. In the same way that another non-aggressor here, right? And so we had to stop those armies, to stop the horrible advances and unjust advances of the Third Reich, and then of course the great crimes against humanity that were committed in the Holocaust. Sending troops into Kosovo, sending into Rwanda, some of these things, life may need to be taken to stop this threat against other individual human beings and against the common good. So certainly, it doesn't mean you can't ever kill, but you can't ever take innocent human life, is what I would say. And the thing,
in those war scenarios,
right?
Look at the fire bombings in Japan.
Yeah,
we killed 300,000 people in 2 days. In Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we killed 100,000 people. Large, significant majority of those people were probably innocent by what standards you're talking about. But we look back and say, it's a good thing that we took those lives, right?
It depends who you talk to, I suppose. I would say it's a good thing that the war ended, but it always, for the Catholics, we would point to St. Augustine, so year 300s, 400s, who came up with principles that we would follow for just war. But basically, you always need to do absolutely what you can to prevent the loss of innocent life and distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. And now this wasn't a problem up until the last 150 years when we developed the technology to really take so much life at a single time, right? But this is the trouble we're facing with the current conflicts in the Middle East is it's getting almost impossible to distinguish, to take action against an unjust aggressor, have a little bit of collateral damage. But the thing is, you gotta limit it as much as possible. And I think it's a legitimate question to ask was the atomic bomb the appropriate thing to use in that moment?
What about the death penalty then? Because we currently have, so I just heard a number the other day that something like 800 people have taken their lives in Oregon. We currently have something just north of 3,000 on death row in this country. We only execute about 2% a year, but
yeah, I think that goes back to the argument of innocent life. If they've been proven guilty and they've been sentenced, I'm not saying I agree with capital punishment or not. I'm just saying,
yeah,
according to your structure of ethics, you know, if they've been proven guilty in an American court of law, then therefore they're not innocent life.
Well, the thing is now this is very much, again, a faith perspective on my part.
I was going to say, I could really throw faith back at you as a Christian and say, but aren't we all sinners?
Right, so here's what I would say. Capital punishment is not intrinsically wrong the way killing an innocent life is, right? Because you can think 1,000 years ago.
I honestly don't know.
Huh?
I honestly don't know.
Well, what I would say is, it seems to me there's a difference between a person on death row and an innocent, normal innocent person. So the three men in this room, the little girl down the street at the school, there's a difference between that and a death row inmate, right?
Right.
And so there, in many ways, just retribution-wise, they deserve, a horrible serial killer deserves some sort of retribution, right?
Again, I don't know. I mean,
well, so there's just something.
Is it truly an eye for an eye or not?
You want to get people back for horrible things they've done, right?
Well, there's a human guttural feeling, but didn't Christ even make it a point to say, it's not about an eye for an eye?
Right. So, but here's the thing.
Turn the other cheek, bro.
Wait. I'm all for turning the other cheek, and so I'm getting there, right? So I apologize.
Unless they really piss me off.
I like to build something here, I can't just do sound bites, So there's a difference.
That's all I work in, okay?
Yeah. Well, I get at least 10 minutes, of screen time with people at church. So, so there's a difference, right? And so at least the Catholic tradition has always been, when there's no other way to stop someone from harming others, right? If there's no good way to stop someone from harming others, then you can take a person's life through capital punishment. And the reason is, they're a threat to society, a threat to the common good. But folks like now Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, right? The great and famous Pope for, of the last 30 years here. He said, nowadays, the conditions don't exist where these people are a real threat to society, because they can be jailed, they can be incarcerated in a pretty good way, unless they're doing escape from Alcatraz, which really doesn't happen much anymore, right? They're not a real threat. And so even though it's not the same as a regular innocent person, John Paul II certainly advocated that, look, we ought not take their life because they're not a threat to society. We want to give them a chance to change. And even with DNA evidence, have been innocent people executed. Right. And so for me as a Catholic priest, I would want to say it's not the same a person on death row as it is a regular innocent person. It's not as intrinsically wrong, right? Or it's not intrinsically wrong. However, in certain times and circumstances, say we're in the zombie apocalypse and, there's a mass murderer out there and we don't have a jail cell, capital punishment might be a viable option. But nowadays, we want to give them a change and also we don't want to make mistakes. So that's the distinction I would want to make. Sorry, I've been talking the whole time.
No, it's very interesting. Very interesting. So back to state and funded and medically assisted suicide.
Well, David, how did you get us on death row?
I have no idea.
Oh wait, that's me.
It was you. That was your fault. Son of a gun. Okay.
Anyway.
No, my brain is spinning right now. It literally is, because it's opening up so many doors, and it's every time we have Father Nels on, we go over an hour, which is fine. But yeah, so my biggest contention, right or wrong, whether it's ethical or unethical, or whether it's legal or should be legal, shouldn't be legal, my biggest deal is, who has the right to determine whether or not it's an acceptable decision let alone legal, let alone ethically. And then...
I say me.
Okay, but even then, do you really have that right? Because we've jokingly talked about this before where, I have the right over my own body. No, you don't. You really don't. Not in this country. As much as we like to pretend and say that we're free and independent and have these things, like I said, drive down the street naked. You're going to get arrested. You don't have freedom over your body. You cannot control it completely.
Father Nels, put the gimmick back on.
Put your collar back on.
He started taking his.
But that's the point. Is you could. What
did he call the clerical shirt? The clerical shirt. He started stripping.
Oh Lord. But yeah, that's the point I'm making though. Is yes, we like to think, we like to say, oh, we are free Americans. We have the right to our body. You really don't. Because in society, when you walk outside and you say, I'm going to take my hand and do something that's deemed unethical with it, they have the right to arrest me and say, you broke a law with that hand. So then I can't say, well, officer, it's my body, it's my hand. I have a right to steal this bottle of booze or whatever. You know what I mean? They can say no.
Yeah, but you're harming other people.
Okay. Again, if I wanted to walk out of my house.
From other people, you're harming somebody else.
If I want to walk outside of my house,
if you're walking around naked, you're harming people.
Well, I know that I'm harming individuals. But that's the point is I don't have a right over my complete body. If I'm in the privacy of my own home, yes, I do, to a degree. But yeah. And so again, so you want to use the harming others argument, you would say, okay, well, if my mom committed suicide, it would harm me. I would have emotional punitive damage, emotional distress.
She's going to die. You're going to be punitively emotional.
I know, but I'm a selfish American human being.
Well, and I think this comes back to what Father John was talking about us being naturally communal human beings, that our actions or inactions have an effect on other people, and that's an unavoidable element of who we are, of our nature as human beings.
Okay, then.
Well, and so I mean, I guess the by extension, then, this is why, and I'm making your point, or supporting your point too. That's the reason why as you're saying, some people claim, well, it's my body, I can do what I want with it. That because even the minor things we do to ourselves or with ourselves have an effect on the society around us, the world around us. Even
right.
if I say, well, it's my choice whether I want to put all this junk food in my body and eat in that way. Okay, well then I'm going to go, when I have my heart attack, I'm going to be at a hospital and I'm going to be drawing from, even their own personal insurance. That's something that everybody else has put into. I'm going to be taking up that doctor's time who has to give me a bypass. So even my seemingly personal decisions of eating 20 times a week is going to have an effect on the society around us. And so this is part of the reason I would make society does have a say in a lot of the actions that we can or can't take as human beings.
Interesting. And then that breaks down to, are we really free? But that's another podcast for another time.
And if that's the case, then why are we free to do anything?
Right. Well,
everything affects everybody else.
That's not a biblical thing. That's just an American thing.
There's a possibility that a butterfly flapping his wings is going to cause somebody else some great pain. So we shouldn't allow the.
That's an actual theory, Ken. The butterfly effect. That's a real theory.
That's why I said it, damn it.
I know. All right. Well, let's bring this thing to a close, because I honestly I have no idea where to go here, other than I personally, as a Christian who doesn't believe in not believe, just I just don't want to see life ended. Period. I do understand that it's a fact. You can't change. It happens. People die. People die gracefully. People die terribly, torturously, and dramatically, traumatically. Whether or not someone should have the right to control that, I honestly don't know. I will say...
Wait.
Go ahead.
You never answered my question before.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Of the situation, you're captured by ISIS. They're going to come in. They're going to come in tomorrow with a hacksaw and hack your head off. and then somebody comes in with a glass of grape juice and says, if you drink this, you won't have to go through the horrible execution. What do you do?
What would Jesus do?
I'd say Jesus would turn it into wine.
There it is. There it is.
Party.
That way he could at least be hammered before he gets executed. No, it's of course I'm feeling fine right now. Is that
an act of compassion, or is that viewed as in the same?
I'm not
exactly the same. If
I'm not comfortable answering that because I can see value in both. Right now, because I'm not in the situation. I'm not in pain. I don't.
You can see value in suffering through having your head hacked off.
If I knew that it would cause my American people to rise up and avenge me in some way, quite possibly. But again, I'm a bad person to ask.
Father Nels just said Red Dawn.
Right. I can't answer that honestly because I'm not in that situation. I'm not in pain. I don't have the intense pain. I don't have the absolute fear that comes with the knowledge that I'm going to be executed in that manner tomorrow. So I honestly can't. I want to give an honest answer and I can't. So that's why I'm saying I can't because I'm not in it. And
well then.
I'm going to come to your house tomorrow, and I'm going to cut your head off. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Well, you can't.
I'm smart enough to know that I don't have the authority to say.
Applying that same logic, you can't know what it's going to feel like if you're told that you have terminal cancer.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% on that.
Great pain.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that, which is why I haven't established an absolute position on this because I see the value in saying no, it's temporary, it will pass, and so will you. And I also see the value in, you should have the right to stop your pain. It's just so finite.
Well, I will say that in my particular case, this happened to me. As I stand right now as an armchair quarterback,
right?
Having someone who's put up with a good deal of pain in his life, I would say that I would stick it out as long as I possibly could. Hopefully, till nature takes its course naturally. I got a headache today, not feeling so well. Time to drink the grape juice.
Right.
I'm saying as an absolute break glass in case of emergency, last ditch thing. I can't take this anymore.
Well, and CIA spies and things like that, they get their the cyanide pills or whatever. Like if you're going to be captured and tortured, take these pills and kill yourself or whatever. I mean, that gets into a whole other thing where they legally have the right to do it. So I mean, again, I'm not comfortable taking a position one way or the other on it. I think it's a sad fact of humanity that it's even something that has to be discussed. But it is what it is.
And it's a good thing that we can have these friendly discussions.
Absolutely.
And these types of issues need to be discussed. And they need to be discussed like we're doing it right here. We're yelling, nobody's screaming, nobody's getting hot. Father Nels is looking at me. He's giving me the old side eye over here.
I think we could all agree that ending a life is wrong, or taking a life is wrong. Taking a life that does not belong to yourself is wrong. Biblically, ethically, atheists and believers can agree. If it's not mine to take, it's not right.
Unless their name is Osama bin Laden.
Okay. But, and again, you can touch on the whole, if it is mine to take, then where's the line? And I would have loved to, with the two Catholic, leaders here, I would have loved to have gotten into the religion side of the belief structure and whether or not, suicide is the, unforgivable type of sin. Whether or not Judas, would have been considered. I mean, do you guys want to touch on that real quick?
we can if you. If...
I just want to give it the respect it deserves. Not.
All right. Well, fair enough.
3 minutes, you know.
Well, from the
hour number 2.
All right. Just a quick synopsis from the Catholic perspective would be, it's not an automatic that you would go to hell because of suicide. And the reason for that is one of the things is from the Catholic perspective to be sent to hell for something, let's say like that, is it not only needs to be a serious type of sin, which taking innocent human life is, but the person who's committing the sin needs to be fully aware of what they're doing, needs to know that it's wrong what they're doing, and can't be coerced into it. And so in the situations, especially when people die from suicide, a lot of times we know now, especially with modern medicine and the educations that we have, that a lot of people who are in those situations because of maybe it's fear, maybe it's mental imbalance, whatever it might be, is not making this as a free decision. A lot of people, we don't know for sure, but so the caption would be, we don't know, and so as a result, we ought not just assume that anybody who's committed suicide is automatically in hell. There were people who, in the past, had probably said that, and probably some Catholic priests had declared that, but it's not an official teaching.
As I said, I know firsthand from Catholic priests who have actually said that. That's why I was curious.
Sure, yeah, and it's not an official teaching of the Church that if one dies from suicide that they're automatically going to hell, because of what we do know. Typically, that a lot of these people who are in these situations are not making a free and conscious choice in those matters. So and just and I apologize, Ken, but I don't know how interesting this is for you, but as a Christian, I've often pondered on the story of Judas and whether or not he. I mean, obviously, committing suicide is pretty clear. He was remorseful for the betrayal of Christ. Sure.
If I can hear Ken now.
If the betrayal of Christ was necessary because it was foretold in the prophecy.
Right. So
you have to have prophecy fulfilled in order to.
So the point I'm making, or the question that I have, and I don't expect you to have a clear answer. I'm just curious if you have different information that might help me on my life road. But
what I would just say is the Catholic position is that we cannot ever declare anyone in hell.
Right.
We simply don't know, and frankly. If we have compassion for others, we hope and pray that, one, God does have mercy, and two, that they weren't, that they didn't really fully engage in that. And so we will never declare anyone in hell.
In the Catholic Church, we have the canonized saints, which are those that we declare that we know are in heaven, but we do not have the canonized damned, those that we know are in hell. So we don't call them, we don't call them damned,
So let's play the process of elimination. Is Judas considered a canonized saint?
Canonized saint in heaven? No, he's never ever been talked about or depicted as such. There are a few artists who have painted him in hell, but it's never been an official teaching that he's in hell. But you'd blow me out of the water if you.
No, I totally understand, and believe me, I'm not trying to be facetious. I'm just genuinely trying to work this out. So what you're saying is, you don't officially say that anyone has gone to hell, but you can comfortably say who has gone to heaven, yet you do not include Judas in that. So isn't by the process of elimination, you're basically saying he's not in heaven?
Not quite, because the Church has never officially declared, for example, my grandmother to be in heaven. That doesn't mean that then, she didn't become a canonized saint.
Okay, so we'll play the other game.
It's like guilty or not guilty.
Yeah.
So we're in the court of law. Like, you're not saying that person is innocent.
Okay, so we'll play the other game, because I get the joke there. But at the same time, how about the other 11 disciples?
Yes, the Catholic Church has said that the other 11 are in heaven.
Okay, so that's just interesting to me. So it's kind of like saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to say he went to heaven or he went to hell, but these 11 guys, they're good.
There's a certain, you got your accent right for how most Catholics talk.
Well, and the only reason why I bring that up, and I think the reason where I get confused is when I read the book of Revelation, or I'm assuming in your case the Apocalypse, Doesn't it reference something about the New Jerusalem, and there's like 12 gates that reference the 12 apostles or something like that? And like, wouldn't that have included Judas, or does that include the new dude who showed up after Judas left?
Yeah,
You're like Pablo. You guys are salivating now. seriously.
This is definitely in the second hour. This is definitely the second hour. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, the Book of Revelation we also call the Book of Revelation too, and that one I'll say that one is a very tough one to interpret, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Sure, but you can see where reading that has then raised the question for me.
Sure, yeah, let's go with Saint New Dude, as you've dubbed him.
Okay. I couldn't remember his name.
Dude. But actually, more importantly though, from the Catholic perspective, it would certainly be not a reference to necessarily the apostles, but much more a connection to Israel, to
the 12 tribes
of Israel.
Okay, I can roll with that. And I appreciate the education. All right, gentlemen. Well, we are going to call it a day here. That's we went everywhere, but we usually do. I certainly thank you for joining us today, both of you, and Ken. It's always a pleasure to go down the rabbit hole with you, my friend.
Likewise.
Yeah, we'd love to get your opinions. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Send us an email at pushthebuttonpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. We get constant stuff from you guys, and that's awesome. We get some really interesting email in the last couple of weeks here, and we're going to definitely do an episode very soon where we get into some of your email and talk about some of the things that you brought up. But in the meantime, I think we're going to have to put it on the shelf for now, gentlemen. And
well, we're going to put it on the shelf here. We're going to go get a couple cigars and sit around for the next 5 hours and continue this conversation.
Keep the conversation going. Hit the record button while you're at it, won't you? But thanks again for everybody for listening, and we definitely will see you on the next episode. So,
hey, go ahead.
I was just going to hand it off to you, Ken.
I cut you off. I'm just terrible today.
Terrible.
Just terrible. Yeah.